Welcome to Taiji's Kitchen. Today I'm going to explain you about different aspects of Japanese food. So in the last video of Japanese geography, I got a lot of good feedbacks, so I decided to go further and make more of these videos. And since this is a cooking channel, I thought it was fair to make a video on Japanese food, because there are so many dishes and so many aspects and so many different types of Japanese food. And nowadays, almost everybody knows sushi as a Japanese food, or like miso soup, and perhaps ramen noodle or gyoza or onigiri or some sort. But there are a lot more than that. And also because in this channel I've been cooking a lot of Chinese influenced dishes, Korean style dishes, and also a lot of Western style dishes. I even made Japanese style pasta. So you might be a bit confused what really is Japanese food, or like what really entitles Japanese food. And so in this video I'll be talking about three main topics. First, I'm going to talk about Japanese food in general, but also what makes a dish Japanese food. And secondly, I'll be talking about different categories of Japanese food, primarily in accordance with the history of Japan. And third, why is Japanese food considered healthy, or is it really healthy? So I hope this video helps you to understand Japanese food and maybe get more appreciation for the Japanese food. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first topic is what entitles a dish as a Japanese food. Japanese food, or in Japanese, WASHOKU, which is literally translated as Japanese food, was acknowledged by UNESCO in 2013 as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. And as the Japanese government was applying for this, they picked four aspects that makes up WASHOKU. One is a respect for variety and fresh ingredients. Two, the nutritional balance. Three, expression of the nature and the four seasons. And four, close tie with the seasonal celebrations. So first aspect of respect to the variety of fresh ingredients. So as you may have already saw in the last video of Japanese geography, Japan holds a variety of geographical features as well as different climates. This allows the country Japan, even though the soil is not as rich as many other countries in the world, to hold a variety of different ingredients. We also have a lot of mountains, fields, and also ocean, so we are able to gather different ingredients from different parts of Japan. And because of the harsh geographical features, we have a big respect towards nature, and thus big respect for the food that we are able to receive from the nature. And therefore, within WASHOKU, or Japanese food, it is very, very important that we do justice for the ingredients. And this is also connected with the Buddhist philosophy and seeing not only the animals, but also plants as lives. And therefore we try to bring out as much of the ingredients as possible, and we also try to throw away as little ingredients as possible. And therefore, in compared to like French or Chinese cuisine, where they use a lot of spices or sauces, Japanese food try to keep it simple. This is really to enjoy the fine flavor of each specific ingredients. And within the Japanese culture and Japanese cuisine, eating or cooking is considered one of the most important aspects of life, because we see eating as an exchange of lives. We are receiving the lives from the nature so that we can live further in order to make the world a little bit better place. And that's also why we hold our hands like this and say itadakimasu in the beginning, and also gochusou-sama deshita at the end, as a small prayer to saying thank you for all the lives and all the work that is put into for the food. So the second aspect of WASHOKU is the nutritional balance. Now with the scientific advancement, we know that our body needs different nutrients, vitamins, proteins, fat, and carbohydrates and whatnot. And for the longest time, people didn't know that consciously about the nutrients. But probably through experience, people kind of knew that eating different types of food helps you stay healthy. And also because in Japan there are a lot of different ingredients, it was very important in Japanese cuisine that you have a variety of ingredients. So in Japanese cuisine, you try to have inside one meal, something from the mountains, something from the sea, some leaves, some root vegetable, fruit vegetable, and of course always rice, maybe some kind of pickles. And so even without the scientific backgrounds, Japanese people somehow knew that it is very important for your body to stay healthy, that you pick up different nutrients and thus for the different ingredients. And in Japanese cuisine, there's a phrase called ichiju sansai, meaning one soup and three dishes. So if you go to a restaurant in Japan and when you order a meal, you always have a rice, and then to that you almost always have some kind of soup, and then the main dish, and to that at least two kind of side dishes, mostly vegetable side dishes. So in WASHOKU, it is very important to have variety of ingredients and thus several dishes on one meal. So the third aspect is the expression of nature and the four seasons. So in Japanese culture, cooking was considered as an art form and chef was considered as an artist, where in many cultures, chefs are considered as merely as servants. So in WASHOKU, it is very important that the dishes are presented with aesthetic. Not just any pretty, beautiful way, but instead it should be a representative of the nature and also the season. As you may have saw in the video of Japanese geography, Japan has 4 distinct seasons. And each of these seasons are divided into 6 small seasons. And so through one year, you have 24 seasons actually in Japan. And therefore, when you go to more of the high-end restaurants, which I'll explain later, you have a really beautiful presentation of the nature of the season of that time. And that's also another reason why we have different kind of plates. In Western restaurants, the plates are usually quite simple, just white and round. But in Japan, we have different shapes, different form, and also often with different material. You have porcelain, you have glass, you may use some wood or bamboo, or sometimes even just some kind of leaf as a plate. And we also do a lot of foraging, like I showed in the video of horsetail on the firm. We also have a lot of ingredients that is only available in certain seasons. And so if you go to a Japanese supermarket, there's always a section where they sell some seasonal food. Yes, of course, with technology, you can grow pretty much everything throughout the whole year, but the Japanese people prefer more seasonal ingredients because the ingredients that is in the season taste the best and also has the most nutrients. And so a lot of Japanese people are keen on what vegetable and what fish are in season. So the fourth and the last aspect of washoku is the strong connection with seasonal festivals. In Japanese culture, pretty much every month we have some kind of seasonal festival. And most of those festivals would have some special dish that we pretty much only eat in that festival. Starting with the New Year's, which is one of the most important festivals in Japan. I made a vlog on that, so you should check that out. There I'm showing different cultural things that we do in the New Year and also as a preparation for the New Year, and the special dish of osechi ryori, which over 99% of Japanese people eat as we come in the New Year's. And most of these dishes are only served in the New Year's. And in March we have Girls' Day, in May we have Boys' Day, in July we have so-called Tanabata, in September we have Otsukimi. This is also connected with the third aspect, but washoku is also very important with the seasonal celebrations. So these 4 aspects are the reason why Japanese food is special and why Japanese food is considered as an intangible heritage of humanity and not just collection of dishes. Now let's go into the second topic, which is a different category of Japanese food. So the 3 categories are the traditional Japanese food, semi-modern Japanese food, and the modern Japanese food. So this is a categorization that I made up according to the history of Japan, but I think this just really represents how Japanese food was developed and also evolved throughout. And I think it helps you to understand the Japanese food more. So the first category of traditional Japanese food includes all the food before the year 1868, when the Japanese government opened the country to outside world. So until that point, Japan was under a policy of so-called sakoku, which means locking of the country, restricting all the imports and exports with the outside world, except for China, Portugal, and Holland, and only in one port in Nagasaki, which is all the way southwest of Japan. During this time of sakoku, Japan were able to appreciate over 250 years of peace, where there were no wars, no conflicts, which is known as Pax Tokugawana, because during that time, the government was called Tokugawa Bakufu. And during this time, with very little contact with outside world, happened very similar to the Galapagos effect, where a lot of Japanese culture boomed. So a lot of Japanese culture you may know were actually developed in this period of Pax Tokugawana. So like kimono, kabuki, no theater, sumo, ukiyo-e, sado or tea ceremony, ikebana or flower arrangement, and also a lot of Japanese dishes were invented. For example, the sushi that you know in the form like nigiri sushi or maki-sushi was invented during this period in Edo or Tokyo, because it was very close to the sea and was where the government was the capital of Japan at the time. A lot of wealth were also there, so people were able to get the fresh fish. And also another category, tempura, which is actually originally came from Portugal. The name tempura comes from temperar. It means like to mix or to cook. Until that point, Japanese people didn't know about deep frying, but the people saw the Portuguese people. We took that culture and invented tempura out of that. And also, key aspect of this traditional food is the lack of animal meat, except for chicken, because the Buddhist tradition prohibited people to eat 4-legged animals. And so until that point, Japanese people didn't eat any pork and beef. And so if it has pork or beef, then it's not traditional Japanese food. So other food that are included in this category are like udon or soba noodles, natto, a lot of pickles, sushi and tempura, of course, yakitori, because chicken was 2-legged animal, so it was okay to eat that, unadon, and a lot of the fish dishes. And also within this traditional Japanese food, there are also some subcategories. One is called Shojin ryori, which was actually invented by the Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks were following the strict rules of Buddhism, so they were not allowed to eat animals or fish. And so Shojin ryori is a strict vegan diet. And so if you're vegan, then you should go try to find some Shojin ryori restaurants if you go to Japan, because finding vegan dishes in Japan is quite difficult. And the second subcategory is called kaiseki ryori. So kaiseki ryo is a high-end course meal, and so it starts with an appetizer, and they have first dish, second dish, third dish. It usually have like 5 to 10 dishes. They usually cost about $50 or €50 for lunch, and for dinner it's usually above 100 to go up to like $500 or euro per person. So it is very pricey, but if you happen to go to Japan, I think you should definitely try this because the experience is definitely worth it. And then another subcategory is wagashi, which literally means Japanese snack or Japanese sweets. These are like daifuku mochi, dango, oshiruko, senbei or rice crackers, manju, and variety of so-called nerikiri, which is primarily made with anko, but representing different aspects of nature or like fruits, and it's quite very beautiful, and these are usually served on the side of a tea ceremony. Now let's go into the second category of semi-modern Japanese food. So these are the dishes that were invented after the opening of the country to before the end of the World War II. So after the opening of the country, a lot of Western culture came in. The main thing that influenced Japanese food was the habit of eating meat. So the dish of sukiyaki or shabu-shabu was invented this time, and also a lot of nabe or hot pot dishes. And within this semi-traditional Japanese food, there's a subcategory of so-called WASHOKU, which means Western style Japanese food. So these are invented by the chefs who are working at the Western style restaurants. So those includes like tonkatsu from cutlet, korokke, or the original name is croquette, omuraisu, so combining rice and the omelette, a Japanese style hamburg, or like the curry rice. So even though curry is originally from India, because at that time curry was introduced to Japan through the British people, so we kind of consider curry as a more of the Western food, and therefore is in the category of Western Japanese food. And the last category is the modern Japanese food. And this is all the food that were invented after the World War II. As World War II happened and we were in war with primarily against America, China, and Britain, so a lot of the outside ingredients were banned. But after we lost the war at the year 1945, the United States came in and occupied Japan for actually 7 years. And during that time, Japan was very, very poor, and America at that time helped us redevelop our country. The United States brought us a lot of the wheat and also milk products. Half of that was trying to help us, but half of that is probably so that America has more export. And through this imported wheat flour, we invented a subcategory of this konamon, which means powder or flour products. So this includes okonomiyaki, takoyaki, yakisoba, which is all primarily made from flour. And there's also another subcategory called chuka, which means Chinese food, because before the war we occupied quite a large part of China, and as we lost the war, a lot of people came back from there and brought the culture from there. And that's why we have ramen noodle and gyoza as a Japanese food. Even though they were originally from China, this culture of Chinese food evolved in Japan further and came out to ramen noodle. So hopefully this categorization of Japanese food helps you understand different aspects, different historical backgrounds of Japanese food. And maybe next time you cook Japanese food or when you go to a Japanese restaurant, you can kind of think of from which era or which category these dishes are from. And then you may be able to have a little trivial conversation with your friends. And now let's go to the last topic of why Japanese food is healthy. Or is it really healthy? So compared to many Western countries, and especially the US, the obesity rate in Japan is very, very low. So you may have seen like a street of Japan in like video, in some TV or something. Most people you see are very slim. And Japan still holds the high life expectancy of 84 years old. Here I'm going to talk about different aspects and different arguments of why Japanese food is healthy, and I'll let you be the judge of it. The first aspect is very little or no fat in Japanese food. So there are actually 3 ways to make something savory. 1 is using fat or oil, 2 is using sugar, and the 3rd is use of umami. In Japanese food, we try to avoid the first one. So think of some dish that you really crave for. Maybe that is hamburger or like fries or potato chips, pizza or like donuts. And you realize a lot of them contain a lot of fat. And they are very delicious and savory. And it's not to say that you shouldn't eat any of those. But in traditional Japanese food, except for tempura, we use barely any fat. And instead, we are conscious about umami, which was acknowledged recently as the 5th flavor. We incorporate this umami aspect in our cooking. To do that in Japanese cooking, we use a lot of dashi, which is a combination of seaweed and fish broth. If you want to know more in detail of umami or dashi, please go watch this. I'm explaining in detail of what is really umami and how these are incorporated in Japanese food. So the second aspect is rice over wheat. So in Japan, a lot of people eat rice pretty much every day. There are also even a lot of people who eat rice pretty much every meal. I love rice and I eat more rice than wheat products. There are some studies that shows that rice is easier to be digested, but also raise the blood sugar not as much compared to wheat products. And I don't think rice over wheat is not necessarily the rice and the wheat themselves, but rather what you eat them with. So the wheat product, like bread or pasta, you almost always have some fat content in them. And you will also never ever eat wheat product as it is, without any sauce or additive to it. But rice, like a really good rice, you could really eat it without any additive, without any topping to it. And a lot of the side dish for the rice, they don't necessarily have to be that fatty. A lot of them are quite very simple, like pickles, natto, or like miso soup. None of them have fat in them. Think of eating bread or pasta just with pickles or like some vegetable. Somehow that doesn't work. And the third aspect is fish over meat. A lot of people may know that fish is more healthy than meat, and the main reason why is because of the melting temperature of the meat fat and the fish fat. Beef fat has the melting point above 40 degrees, pork fat between 30 and 40, and chicken fat between 30 and 35. So that means beef fat is always as a solid form in your body, and therefore this can be cause of your blood system to be clotted. Whereas the melting point of the fish fat is between 10 to 20 degrees. And also the animal fat is high in saturated fatty acid. High consumption of these saturated fatty acid raises the risk of high cholesterol and cardiovascular diseases. And the fish acid is unsaturated fat, and therefore fish fat do not have any of these risks. And also a lot of the fish is also high in DHA. Blueback fish like sardines, mackerel, herring, and tuna are also very high in this. And this DHA is said to help to make your brain more active. And the seafood is also high in taurine and EPA, which actually decrease the cholesterol in your bloodstream. So eating fish is actually much more healthy than meat. But this information will never go into the mainstream media, especially in the Western cultures, because those media are usually funded by the meat industries and they don't want people to know that the fish is healthier than meat, which will decrease the consumption of meat. So fourth aspect is the fermented food. So Japanese food contain a lot of the fermented food. Of course, that doesn't mean that other countries don't have fermented food, like a lot of cheese or pickle are also fermented food, but Japanese cuisine contain a lot more of those fermented ingredients, especially if you look at the seasoning. So soy sauce, miso, mirin, sake, pretty much all the Japanese seasonings are made through fermentation. Nowadays, these fermented food are considered healthy because they contain a lot of probiotic, small microorganisms to keep your digestive system healthy and to help you digest as well. And also this process of fermentation helps some ingredients enrich the flavor, and also this helps also use less fat in your food. And the fifth aspect is drinking tea over soda and juice. So in Japanese household, we would pretty much always have some kind of tea in the fridge. Nowadays, it may be a bit changing. Most families would never drink soda or juice during a meal. There's sometimes green tea or roasted green tea, but often it's a roasted barley tea. This contains no sugar, no caffeine. This also doesn't kill the flavor of the food. And as we know from many studies that a lot of sugar intake is unhealthy. So in Japan, it's quite uncommon to drink juice or soda with your meal, and instead we pretty much drink a lot of tea. And the last aspect is the balanced meal. When you see a Japanese meal, you would see that you don't have just like one or two dish, but instead you have a main dish, rice and soup, and then to that you have at least like 2 or 3 more vegetable side dishes. And I don't know how it is in other countries, but in Japan, every school would have a subject called kateka, which means household subject. Inside kateka, we learn to sew or like use the sewing machine. We learned how to clean the house or like how to clean the toilet. Sometimes how we manage the money, but a lot of time is spent for learning about cooking. And also for this, each school would have like a cooking room. And there we learn different basic Japanese dishes. And to that, we also learn the nutritional values of different ingredients, how it is important to take in different variation of ingredients. And this idea kind of comes back to the first aspect of WASHOKU. That's also another reason why Japanese food is considered healthy. So this is the end of this video. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope this kind of helped you understand the Japanese food, different aspects of Japanese food, and historical background to that, and also help you to appreciate Japanese food a little bit more. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you could hit the like button for me so that this video can be spread out to more people. And if you have any feedbacks or if you have any question or any requests for these kind of information video, please feel free to write anything in the comments below. And in the next presentation video, I'm thinking of seasonal festivals in Japan and food connecting to that. So please subscribe so that when that comes out, it gets notified to you. And also I really appreciate it if you could share my channel and my videos with your friends and families. Otherwise, I look forward to see you in the next video. Bye.